Good morning, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to introduce you to practical approaches in how to generate really good looking digital renderings. And I'm actually borrowing a lot from studio photography because technically speaking, a digital software or a rendering application, for example, like what we do here with Blender, is borrowing a lot from an actual approach in the studio. So for example, what we have here is just our product and it's floating in space. So we need to put it onto, for example, a ground plane or, for example, a backdrop. So I have my 3D cursor set to 0. Shift A. I'm going to add a plane. Maybe this edge I bring over. And then in the side view, I am just creating a small rounded edge corner. Maybe like this. No, actually this is too big. Let me do it this way. I want this corner to be a little bit more dramatic, so Control B, scrolling my mouse wheel a little bit. There. Okay. Shade smooth. And this is actually a little bit too long, so I'm just chopping this off. Perfect. So there's our backdrop. It's really important. Now what else do we have inside a studio? In a studio we have, for example, a camera. So somewhere here, I press Shift A and add a camera. So this is the way how the camera looks inside Blender. So you see kind of like the cone, so the direction it looks. This yellow triangle tells you this is where the upper part of the camera is. So left, right, bottom edge. And with S we can actually scale this icon down. It's not really that we make the image smaller, it's just how large or how big the camera is represented in our scene. Now every camera inside the studio would be not floating in space, but would be on a tripod. But because this is a digital software, we don't really have to build or put in a tripod. Our camera doesn't fall down. So, however, for example, if I would like the camera to look at my cloth iron, I could rotate it. And then from here, I would probably have to use local space and rotate it down. And hopefully I will get to an angle that it really looks onto the cloth iron. And you already can see it's kind of cumbersome and annoying. So a better way or more efficient way would actually be somewhere here. I just add an empty. And like I mentioned during the last class, an empty is nothing else than just a representation of a point somewhere in 3D space. And there is now the possibility to tell the software that the camera should all the time look at this empty. And to do this, we select the camera, we shift, select the empty, and then we can press Control T. You get this menu, Make Track, and the one you would like to use is Track to Constraint. And then you see there's a dotted line, and this means when I move my camera, you see it always looks at this empty. When I move the empty, the camera follows it. If you select the camera, you will see that there is now an icon with two chains. That's the button for the constraints. So you see it says track 2. Our target for this empty, for the camera is the empty. And it follows the negative Z. You see actually positive Z is going away backwards in the camera. So you see we can change this. But of course, you want it to look towards that empty. So I could, for example, delete this and then the camera is back. So you see this is kind of like similar to the modifiers, just an interactive feature we add to the camera. Now to look through the camera, the way how I work very often, up here in the smaller area, I activate another viewport, and then either you can press 0 on your numpad, or you go to View and Camera. And then you can now see actually through the camera. And you can see when I move my camera closer to the object, the cloth iron will get bigger. And now I could go ahead and start maybe top view and then side view. Play around like what could be really interesting looks. Of course, I don't want to over dramatize something at the same time make it awkward to look at, so I have to find like a good position from where I show like the nicest features of my product. So let's say this would be an okay shot. And maybe the backdrop I would like to rotate a little bit, so it is actually that this line is kind of like parallel with my camera. Okay, that's basically how you can place a camera. Let's maybe take a look at what other features the camera has. So when you click on the camera icon, you can name this maybe main camera, because you can have multiple cameras inside your scene. For example, I select everything and then say Shift D. And then I press Control 0. So now, for example, I have added another camera and I'm moving it in, so I'm, for example, focusing on this particular small dial. Just think about, you have to make a presentation on a board and then you have different views. Of course, you do not want to move your one camera all the time across. That would really be inefficient. It's better just to have multiple cameras. And for example, I call this one button camera. And then by clicking a camera and pressing Control 0, you can switch between them. See? Perfect. Okay. The next thing we need is actually light. So you can press Shift A, and then here we have a section for lamps. And what I would like you to start working with is actually the area light. The area light, if I zoom in a little bit, is rectangular in its shape, and it has a dotted line perpendicular from this rectangular surface. Area lights are basically simulating a light surface, kind of like light boxes or diffuse boxes inside the studio. They emit from a surface light very softly. They're very great for product renderings. And in this dotted line, this basically tells you the direction of the light. So let's move this one to here. And if you compare, for example, the size of this light to the object, we can see this is actually kind of tiny. So maybe 2 feet could be a good size, kind of like this. And similar to the camera with the empty, I also would like to track those lights to other empties. So I can select this light, Shift select this empty, Control T, track. And for example, I can move those parts. Oh, or maybe this way. Okay, great. Shift D, duplicating this light because I would like to have a second light. Shift D. Okay. So if I look through this camera, I have light coming from the right and I have light coming from the left side. And this basically helps me to illuminate a three-dimensional object more evenly, because like in real life, you have light coming from multiple directions. Okay, this was basically all the basic stuff for how to set up our scene.